What if one of the biggest financial lies you've ever believed wasn't told by a scammer or a dishonest investment advisor, but by society itself? Imagine two people. Both earn respectable incomes. Both work hard. Both pay their bills on time. Both dream of becoming financially free. 20 years later, one has accumulated lasting wealth. The other is still working just as hard, wondering where all the money went. What happened? Was one simply luckier? Did one discover a secret investment? Did one inherit money? In many cases, none of the above. The difference was hidden inside nearly every purchase they made. Every year, millions of people proudly buy things they believe are making them wealthier. A larger house, a newer luxury car, designer furniture, premium electronics, expensive watches. Each purchase feels like progress. Each one looks like success. Friends congratulate them. Family admires them. Social media rewards them. Yet beneath the surface, something very different is quietly unfolding. Those same purchases often demand more income, more maintenance, more debt, more stress, more years of work. The tragedy is that most people never notice, because everything looks successful from the outside. This is the invisible trap that has delayed financial freedom for generations. We've been taught to believe that owning expensive things means becoming wealthy. But ownership alone has never created wealth. What matters is what your possessions do after you buy them. Do they quietly put money back into your life? Or do they quietly take more away? That single question separates consumers from owners, employees from investors, appearance from reality. In this documentary, we're going to challenge one of the most deeply rooted beliefs about money. We'll uncover why intelligent people repeatedly buy liabilities believing they're assets, why our brains are naturally attracted to expensive financial mistakes, why marketers encourage those mistakes, and why self-made millionaires often buy things that almost nobody notices. By the end of this journey, you won't simply think differently about money. You'll think differently about every purchase you ever make. Because wealth isn't determined by how impressive your possessions appear. It's determined by what those possessions quietly do while nobody is watching. But before we can understand what an asset really is, we first have to expose the illusion that keeps millions trapped. Ask 100 people one simple question. What is an asset? Most answers would sound surprisingly similar. A house, a luxury car, jewelry, an expensive watch, a bigger apartment, a vacation property, the newest smartphone. The answers are understandable. After all, these are valuable possessions. They cost money. Some even increase social status. So surely they must be assets, right? Not necessarily. This misunderstanding has quietly shaped financial decisions for decades. The problem isn't that these possessions have value. The problem is believing that value automatically creates wealth. It doesn't. Imagine someone buys a luxury SUV worth $70,000. The day they drive it home, they proudly tell friends, "I bought an asset." It certainly feels like one. It's expensive, beautifully designed. People admire it. But over the next few years, fuel expenses arrive. Insurance payments increase. Maintenance becomes more expensive. Repairs become inevitable. Registration fees continue. Eventually, the vehicle loses value. What once looked like an asset quietly begins demanding more and more money every year. Instead of producing wealth, it continuously consumes it. Now compare that to something much less exciting. A small investment in a broad market index fund. Nobody notices it. There are no compliments, no photographs, no admiration from strangers. But while the luxury vehicle steadily loses value, the investment quietly begins doing something remarkable. It starts working. Dividends are reinvested. Compound growth begins. Years pass. The investment grows. Not because it demanded more money every month, but because it quietly produced more value than it consumed. One purchase required constant financial support. The other gradually became financial support. That difference changes everything. Yet society rarely celebrates the invisible choice. Think about the advertisements you see every day. Luxury cars speeding through breathtaking landscapes. Elegant homes with perfect interiors. designer watches resting on confident wrists, high-end fashion associated with success. Very few advertisements encourage you to buy productive assets. Nobody creates dramatic commercials about owning an index fund. You won't see cinematic advertisements celebrating dividend reinvestment. Business ownership rarely appears on giant billboards, because productive assets aren't designed to impress strangers. They're designed to quietly improve your future. This is where the great illusion begins. We've confused expensive possessions with wealth-producing ownership, and those two things are very different. The world rewards visible consumption. Real wealth rewards invisible ownership. One earns admiration today. The other purchases freedom tomorrow. This is why two people with identical incomes can build completely different financial futures. Not because one earned dramatically more, but because they define the word asset differently. One filled a garage, the other built a portfolio. One collected possessions, the other accumulated ownership. At first, the difference seems almost insignificant. A few $100s invested each month. A luxury upgrade postponed. A deliberate financial decision repeated quietly. Nothing dramatic happens overnight. But wealth rarely announces itself in dramatic moments. It grows beneath the surface, like roots spreading beneath a tree long before anyone notices the branches. That is why so many people miss it. They're watching the leaves, while the wealthy are patiently growing the roots. And once you understand what those roots really are, you'll never mistake a liability for an asset again. Because the real definition of an asset has almost nothing to do with what something costs, and everything to do with what it continues doing after you own it. That's where our journey leads next. Because the definition most people were taught isn't the one that actually builds wealth. Imagine two buckets sitting side by side. The first bucket is labeled income. The second is labeled wealth. Most people assume they're the same bucket. They're not. Income is simply money flowing into your life. Wealth is what remains after your financial decisions have had their say. That distinction sounds almost too simple. Yet it explains why some of the world's highest earners still end up financially trapped, while others quietly become millionaires on ordinary salaries. The misunderstanding begins with a single word: asset. Ask 10 people to define it, and you'll probably hear 10 different answers. But the definition that matters most isn't the one found in a dictionary. It's the one that shapes your financial behavior. Here's a simple way to think about it. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket, or has a high probability of increasing your financial position over time. A liability is something that continuously takes money out of your pocket. Notice what isn't mentioned: price, prestige, luxury, status. None of those determine whether something is an asset. Only one question matters: what happens after you own it? Does it continue creating value? Or does it continue demanding more of your money? That single question has quietly built and destroyed countless fortunes. Let's meet two familiar faces, Daniel and Alex. By now, both have established successful careers. They're in the same industry. They earn almost identical salaries. They receive similar bonuses. From the outside, they appear to be living the same financial story. But beneath the surface, their money is following two completely different paths. Daniel has always believed that success should be visible. When he receives a promotion, he celebrates with an upgrade. His apartment becomes a larger condominium. The reliable sedan becomes a luxury SUV. The furniture becomes designer furniture. His wardrobe changes. His vacations become more expensive. Each decision feels justified. After all, he worked hard for it, and none of these purchases are irresponsible by themselves. The problem isn't the individual purchase. The problem is the pattern. Every upgrade quietly introduces a new monthly obligation: a larger mortgage, higher insurance, more maintenance, bigger utility bills, premium memberships, property taxes, unexpected repairs. The lifestyle grows. So does the financial pressure required to maintain it? Daniel believes he's accumulating assets. In reality, he's accumulating responsibilities. Now look at Alex. His salary increased too. His life improved too. But every financial decision begins with a different question. Before spending money, he asks, Will this purchase make my future stronger? Sometimes the answer is yes. Many times, it's no. Instead of immediately upgrading his lifestyle, Alex quietly directs a portion of every raise toward ownership. He purchases shares of businesses through low-cost index funds. He contributes consistently to retirement investments. Eventually, he buys a small rental property. Years later, he invests in a local business operated by someone he trusts. None of these purchases attract attention. Nobody compliments his investment account. Nobody notices another dividend payment. No one congratulates him for increasing his ownership in productive assets. Because ownership is remarkably quiet. Yet every month, something extraordinary begins happening. While Daniel's possessions ask for more money, Alex's assets begin providing it. His investments distribute dividends. His rental property generates income. His business ownership creates additional cash flow. Slowly, almost invisibly, money begins working alongside him. Then something fascinating happens. Neither man changes his work ethic. Neither suddenly earns twice as much. But their financial lives begin moving in opposite directions. Daniel's lifestyle depends entirely on his next paycheck. If his income stops, the payments continue. Alex still values his paycheck, but it is no longer his only source of progress. His assets continue creating value, whether he's sitting in an office, reading a book, or sleeping. That is the hidden difference between earning money and owning something that earns money. This idea often feels almost unfair at first. Many people ask, how can investments make money while someone does nothing? The answer lies in ownership. When you own part of a successful company, you own a share of the value it creates. When customers purchase products, that business earns revenue. As an owner, you benefit. When you own an apartment that someone rents, you're providing housing. The rent becomes income. When you own intellectual property, a book, a course, software, music, or a patent, that ownership can continue creating value long after the original work has been completed. Ownership allows your past effort to keep working in the future. Consumption rarely does. This is one of the greatest differences between wealthy thinking and consumer thinking. Consumers ask, what can this money buy? Owners ask, what can this money become? Those two questions seem almost identical, but over 20 years, they produce completely different lives. Now, this doesn't mean buying a home is always a liability, or that every investment automatically becomes an asset. Reality is far more nuanced. A home that appreciates significantly may increase your net worth. A poorly managed business can lose money. A speculative investment can become a costly mistake. The lesson isn't to label every purchase as good or bad. The lesson is to understand its financial behavior. What is this purchase likely to do over time? Will it create future opportunities or future obligations? That simple habit transforms financial decision-making. Before buying something expensive, the wealthy often pause, not because they're afraid to spend money, but because they instinctively compare every purchase to another possibility. This luxury car, or another investment. This designer watch, or another share of ownership. This larger house, or another stream of future income. Suddenly, every dollar faces competition, not between one product and another, but between today's pleasure and tomorrow's freedom. That invisible competition is where wealth is quietly built. Because every financial decision carries a cost beyond the price tag. Economists call it opportunity cost. It may be one of the most powerful ideas in personal finance. If assets build wealth and liabilities quietly delay it, why do so many intelligent, hardworking people continue making financial decisions that work against their own future? The answer isn't a lack of intelligence. It isn't poor mathematics. And it certainly isn't because most people don't work hard enough. The answer lies much deeper. It lies inside the human brain. Imagine walking into a luxury shopping mall. The lighting feels warm and inviting. The music is calm. The scent in the air is carefully chosen. Every product is perfectly arranged. Nothing about the experience is accidental. Every detail has been designed to influence one thing, a decision. Most people believe they make purchasing decisions logically. Behavioral finance tells a very different story. Long before you compare prices, long before you read reviews, long before you convince yourself that something is worth it, your brain has already begun making emotional judgments. That's because human beings evolved long before money ever existed. Thousands of years ago, survival depended on belonging to a tribe. People with higher status often had greater access to food, protection, and opportunity. Your brain learned an important lesson. Status matters. That instinct helped our ancestors survive. The problem is that while the world changed, our psychology didn't. Today, we're no longer competing for survival. We're competing for attention, recognition, validation, and social status. The brain doesn't always recognize the difference. This is why modern consumer culture is so powerful. Companies rarely sell products. They sell identities. Think about a luxury watch. A $50 watch and a $10,000 watch perform the same basic function. They both tell time. Yet millions of people willingly pay hundreds of times more for one over the other. Why? Because they aren't buying the watch. They're buying what the watch represents. Success, achievement, exclusivity, importance, respect. The purchase becomes a statement, not to the world alone, but to themselves. The same pattern appears everywhere. Luxury vehicles, designer clothing, exclusive neighborhoods, premium technology, high-end restaurants, expensive vacations. Each purchase quietly answers an emotional question. Who am I? Behavioral psychologists have discovered something remarkable. People rarely buy with logic. They justify with logic, but they buy with emotion. Think about the last luxury car advertisement you saw. Did it focus on engine specifications, fuel efficiency, long-term maintenance costs? Probably not. Instead, it showed freedom, adventure, confidence, admiration. It invited you to imagine becoming a different version of yourself, one that other people notice, one that other people admire. Suddenly, the purchase isn't about transportation anymore. It's about identity. And identity is one of the strongest forces shaping financial behavior. This explains why someone earning an average income might stretch their finances to buy a luxury car, or finance the newest smartphone every year, or purchase designer brands they can barely afford. They're not simply buying products. They're buying emotions, recognition, belonging, achievement. For a brief moment, the purchase feels incredible. Your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with anticipation and reward. Everything feels exciting. You feel successful. You feel accomplished. But something fascinating happens. The feeling fades. Soon, yesterday's dream becomes today's normal. The luxury car no longer feels extraordinary. The new phone becomes just another phone. The expensive watch blends into everyday life. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. Human beings quickly adapt to improved circumstances. What once felt extraordinary eventually feels ordinary. And once something feels ordinary, the brain begins searching for the next upgrade. Another purchase, another experience, another symbol of success. Without realizing it, many people step onto what researchers call the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much faster they run, they never feel like they've truly arrived. This is where liabilities quietly multiply. Not because people are irresponsible, but because they're trying to satisfy emotional needs with financial purchases. Meanwhile, self-made wealth builders begin asking different questions. Instead of asking, will this impress people? They ask, will this improve my future? Instead of chasing temporary excitement, they pursue lasting ownership. That doesn't mean they never enjoy life. Far from it. They travel, celebrate milestones, buy things they genuinely value. But they understand an important principle. Lifestyle should be funded by wealth, not financed at the expense of it. That single distinction changes everything. Because every major purchase carries an invisible question. Will this increase my image or increase my independence? One choice often creates admiration today. The other quietly creates freedom tomorrow. The irony is almost impossible to ignore. Many people who appear wealthy are working harder than ever simply to maintain appearances. Meanwhile, some of the wealthiest individuals you could meet look surprisingly ordinary. They understand that freedom is difficult to photograph. Ownership rarely attracts attention. Cash flow doesn't receive compliments. An investment portfolio isn't glamorous. But those quiet decisions eventually purchase something that status never can. Choice. The choice to leave a stressful job. The choice to spend more time with family. The choice to start a business. The choice to say no without fearing the next paycheck. That is the real purpose of wealth. Not to make strangers believe you're successful, but to give you control over your own life. And yet, there is another invisible force making this psychological trap even stronger than it has ever been before. One that follows us everywhere. In our pockets, on our desks, and often in our hands before we've even gotten out of bed. Social media. Once comparison became constant, the race to appear wealthy accelerated in ways no previous generation had ever experienced. An understanding that may be one of the most important financial lessons of all. For most of human history, comparison happened slowly. You compared yourself to your neighbors, perhaps a coworker, a close friend, someone in your community. The circle was small. The influence was limited. Today, that circle has expanded beyond anything our ancestors could have imagined. Before you've even finished your morning coffee, you've already seen dozens of carefully curated lives. Someone is celebrating the purchase of a new home. Someone else is driving a luxury sports car. A former classmate is relaxing on a beach in the Maldives. An entrepreneur shares a screenshot of an extraordinary month of sales. Another influencer appears to have mastered life before turning 30. Within minutes, your brain begins asking a dangerous question. Am I falling behind? What's remarkable is that nothing in your own financial life has actually changed. Yesterday, your apartment felt comfortable. Today, it suddenly feels too small. Yesterday, your car was dependable. Today, it feels outdated. Yesterday, your wardrobe was perfectly adequate. Today, it somehow feels incomplete. The only thing that changed was your reference point. Behavioral psychologists call this social comparison. Human beings rarely measure success in absolute terms. Instead, we measure it relative to the people around us. And in the digital age, the people around us includes millions of carefully edited lives. But here's what most people never stop to consider. You're rarely comparing your everyday reality to someone else's everyday reality. You're comparing your ordinary Tuesday to someone else's greatest highlight. You see the luxury vacation. You don't see the credit card balance that paid for it. You see the expensive home. You don't see the 30 years of mortgage payments. You see the designer clothes. You don't see the financial anxiety that may exist behind them. You see the celebration, not the sacrifice. Appearances have never been easier to create, and genuine wealth has never been harder to recognize. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of modern finance. The easier it becomes to look wealthy, the harder it often becomes to actually become wealthy, because maintaining an image is expensive. Every upgrade creates expectations. A nicer car demands higher insurance. A larger house demands larger bills. Luxury habits quietly become everyday habits. Eventually, yesterday's reward becomes tomorrow's obligation. And without realizing it, many people begin working not to build freedom, but simply to maintain appearances. Imagine two people receiving the exact same $20,000 bonus. The first immediately upgrades their lifestyle. A luxury vacation, a designer wardrobe, the newest smartphone, a premium watch. Within a few weeks, the money has disappeared. The memories remain, but the financial position hasn't changed. The second person celebrates too. They enjoy a meaningful trip with family. They buy something they've genuinely wanted for years. But before anything else, they invest a significant portion into productive assets. Years later, that same money has quietly multiplied. The temporary reward became a permanent advantage. Both people enjoyed the bonus. Only one allowed it to keep working. This is where the difference between consumers and owners becomes impossible to ignore. Consumers often ask, "What can this money buy today?" Owners ask, What can this money continue doing tomorrow? At first, the questions sound almost identical, but over decades, they create entirely different lives. One builds a collection of possessions. The other builds a collection of productive assets. One becomes dependent on future paychecks. The other becomes increasingly supported by past decisions. This is why wealthy individuals often appear surprisingly ordinary. Research in self-made millionaires has repeatedly found that many live well below their means. Not because they dislike comfort, not because they're afraid to spend, but because they understand something many people never discover. Every dollar has two possible destinations. It can purchase status, or it can purchase freedom. The challenge is that status delivers its reward immediately. Freedom delivers its reward slowly. And the human brain naturally prefers immediate gratification. That's why delayed gratification is one of the rarest financial skills. It requires believing in a future you cannot yet see. Imagine planting a young fruit tree. For the first few years, there's almost nothing to harvest. Someone walking past might wonder why you bother planting it at all. But year after year, the roots deepen, the trunk strengthens, the branches expand. Eventually, the tree begins producing fruit. Not once, but season after season, without needing to be planted again. Assets behave in much the same way. Each investment becomes another tree. Each ownership stake becomes another branch. Each dividend becomes another seed capable of producing future growth. At first, the progress feels disappointingly slow. Many people lose patience during this stage. They dig up the seed to see if it's growing. They sell investments too early. They abandon good strategies because they expected dramatic results. But wealth has never rewarded impatience. It rewards consistency. It rewards perspective. It rewards those willing to trust time. That is why the greatest cost of buying liabilities isn't always the money you spend today. It's the wealth that money never has the opportunity to become. Every expensive liability quietly competes with a future asset. Every impulse purchase competes with future cash flow. Every unnecessary upgrade competes with future independence. Those invisible trade-offs rarely appear on receipts, but they become impossible to ignore 20 years later. This is the hidden price of looking wealthy. You may gain admiration in the present, while unknowingly delaying freedom in the future. And perhaps the greatest irony of all is this. The people who appear richest are not always the ones with the greatest wealth. Often, they're simply the ones spending the most effort convincing the world they already have it. Meanwhile, the individuals quietly building real wealth continue doing something far less exciting. They keep buying ownership, again and again and again, because they understand a truth that transforms every financial decision. Freedom isn't purchased all at once. It's accumulated, one asset at a time. Imagine asking two people the exact same question. You just received an extra $10,000. What are you going to do with it? The first person smiles. I've been waiting for this. They immediately begin making a list. A new car, a luxury vacation, designer furniture, the latest phone, a watch they've wanted for years. None of these choices are inherently wrong. The problem isn't the purchase. The problem is that every dollar has been assigned a single mission: to be spent. Now, imagine asking the second person the very same question. Their first response isn't excitement. It's curiosity. How can this money continue working after I've spent it? Notice the difference. One person sees money as the finish line. The other sees it as the starting point. That single shift is one of the defining characteristics of people who build lasting wealth. They stop thinking like earners. They begin thinking like owners. At first, the distinction sounds subtle, but over decades, it changes everything. For most people, a paycheck represents the end of a process. You work, you get paid, you spend, then the cycle begins again. Owners see the paycheck differently. To them, income is raw material. Its purpose isn't simply to improve today's lifestyle. Its purpose is to build tomorrow's income. Every dollar becomes a potential employee. Some employees work for a few days. Others work for decades. The question is, which kind are you hiring? Imagine walking into a company where every employee quits after a single day, the business would struggle to survive. Now imagine a company filled with employees who never stop working. They continue producing value, generating revenue, creating opportunities. That is exactly what productive assets do. They become workers you no longer have to supervise every hour of every day. A share in a successful business continues creating value. A rental property continues producing income. Intellectual property continues generating royalties. An investment portfolio continues compounding. Even while you're asleep, even while you're on vacation, even after you've retired. This is why ownership is so powerful. It disconnects your future from your immediate effort. Not completely, but gradually. And gradual change is how lasting wealth is almost always created. Many people believe financial freedom arrives the day they receive a massive paycheck. History suggests otherwise. Some of the highest paid professionals in the world remain financially dependent because every increase in income is matched by an increase in spending. At the same time, countless individuals with far more modest incomes quietly accumulate extraordinary wealth because they consistently convert income into ownership. The difference isn't always how much money enters the account. It's what happens after it arrives. Think back to Daniel and Alex. Years have passed. Both have enjoyed successful careers. Both have earned promotions. Both have experienced financial opportunities. From the outside, Daniel's life appears more impressive. The luxury home, the premium vehicles, the designer lifestyle, everything communicates success. But beneath that image lies a fragile reality. Every possession demands another payment. Every payment requires another paycheck. Every paycheck requires another month of work. Without realizing it, Daniel hasn't just purchased expensive things. He's purchased expensive obligations. Now look at Alex. His lifestyle has improved too. He enjoys travel. He celebrates milestones. He spends money on experiences that matter to him. But one principle has never changed. Ownership first, lifestyle second. Every raise increased his investments before it increased his spending. Every bonus strengthened his portfolio before it upgraded his lifestyle. Every financial decision quietly widened the gap between dependence and freedom. Today, something remarkable has happened. Alex no longer works only for money. His money has begun working alongside him. The dividends from his investments purchase additional shares. Rental income helps fund new opportunities. Business ownership creates new streams of cash flow. His financial life has developed momentum. Momentum is one of the most underestimated forces in wealth building. At first, progress feels painfully slow. A few $100s invested every month doesn't seem life-changing. Neither does purchasing one additional share of an index fund or reinvesting one dividend payment. Everything feels ordinary, almost insignificant. But wealth rarely announces itself in dramatic moments. It compounds quietly. One investment becomes another. One asset purchases the next. One opportunity creates another opportunity. Eventually, money begins producing more money than effort alone ever could. That is the moment ownership changes from a concept into a lifestyle. The remarkable thing is that this mindset extends far beyond investing. Owners approach learning differently. Instead of asking, "Will this book entertain me?" they ask, "Will this knowledge increase my future value?" They approach skills differently. Instead of asking, "What pays the most today?" they ask, "What will remain valuable 10 years from now?" Even relationships change. They surround themselves with people who challenge their thinking instead of encouraging unnecessary consumption. Little by little, their entire environment begins supporting long-term decisions instead of short-term impulses. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. Ownership isn't merely about acquiring assets. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally builds them. Because before someone owns productive investments, they first develop productive habits. Before they accumulate wealth, they accumulate discipline. Before they experience financial freedom, they learn to delay unnecessary gratification. The portfolio simply becomes a reflection of the person, which raises one final question. If ownership creates wealth and habits sustain it, What is the ultimate purpose of becoming wealthy in the first place? The answer has nothing to do with luxury, nothing to do with status, and surprisingly, very little to do with money itself. For a moment, forget the luxury homes, forget the expensive cars, forget the investment portfolios, forget the number in the bank account. Ask yourself a much simpler question. Why do you want to become wealthy? It's a question that almost everyone answers differently. I want security. I want to retire early. I want to travel. I want to take care of my family. I want to stop worrying about money. But if you look closely, nearly every answer points toward the same destination. Not more possessions, more freedom. This may be the greatest misunderstanding about wealth. People believe they're chasing money, when in reality, they're chasing the life they believe money will make possible. Money itself has never been the final goal. Money is simply a tool that can purchase comfort, a tool that can create opportunity, a tool that can reduce uncertainty. But perhaps its greatest purpose is something much deeper. It gives you choices. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, not because an alarm clock forced you out of bed, but because you chose to. Imagine accepting work because it excites you, not because missing one paycheck would create panic. Imagine taking time off to care for a loved one without wondering how the bills will be paid. Imagine having the freedom to start a business you've always believed in, or to leave a career that no longer reflects who you've become. That is what wealth quietly purchases. Choice. The freedom to decide how your time is spent. Because time is the one asset no investment can replace. You can earn more money. You can rebuild a business. You can recover from financial mistakes. But you cannot buy back yesterday. This is why the truly wealthy think differently about time. Many people spend their entire lives trading hours for dollars. Owners gradually build systems that allow dollars to protect their hours. That shift changes everything. It changes how work is viewed, how risk is viewed, how opportunities are evaluated. Eventually, work becomes something you choose, instead of something you fear losing. This doesn't mean wealthy people stop working. Many continue building businesses, investing, creating, and solving problems well beyond the point where they need more money. Why? Because purpose and income are not the same thing. One fulfills the bank account, the other fulfills the person. Financial freedom doesn't mean doing nothing. It means having the freedom to decide what deserves your effort. And perhaps that's the greatest luxury of all. Not a larger house, not a more expensive watch, not a newer car. The ability to say yes to what matters and no to what doesn't. That freedom is built quietly, long before anyone notices it. It begins with a decision to own rather than consume, to invest rather than impress, to think decades instead of days, to ask better questions before making ordinary purchases. Over time, those small decisions become habits. Those habits become identity. That identity shapes every financial choice that follows. Eventually, the results become impossible to ignore. People looking from the outside often describe self-made wealth as luck. They assume someone found the perfect investment, started a business at exactly the right time, or simply earned an unusually high income. But they rarely see the invisible story. The weekends spent learning while others were distracted. The years of consistent investing during uncertain markets. The unnecessary purchases quietly avoided. The temptation resisted. The patience practiced. The ownership accumulated one decision at a time. Real wealth isn't dramatic. It's remarkably ordinary. It grows through countless moments that seem too small to matter. Until one day, they matter more than anything else. If there's one lesson this documentary leaves behind, let it be this. Every purchase tells a story, not about the product, about the future you're building. Some purchases quietly increase your dependence. Others quietly increase your freedom. Neither decision changes your life overnight, but repeated thousands of times, they create completely different destinies. So the next time you're about to spend money, pause for a moment. Don't ask, can I afford this? Ask something far more powerful. Will this make me richer? Or simply look richer? Because the answer to that question will shape far more than your next purchase. It may shape the next 20 years of your financial life. The wealthiest people in the world didn't become wealthy because they never spent money. They became wealthy because they understood the difference between spending money and planting it. One disappears, the other grows, and growth has always been the language of wealth. Thank you for watching The Wealth Lab. If this documentary changed the way you think about assets and liabilities, let us know in the comments. What's one purchase you've made that you now realize was a liability? And what's one asset you plan to start building instead? Your answer might inspire someone else to make a better financial decision today. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more deep dives into wealth psychology, behavioral finance, investing, and financial freedom. Because in our next documentary, we'll explore a question that may be even more important than what you own. Why does financial freedom feel so difficult to achieve, even for people who earn more than enough? Until then, remember this. Income gives you options. Ownership creates wealth. But the way you think determines which one becomes your future.